There was a time in this fair land when the railroad did not run, when the wild, majestic mountains stood alone against the sun. Long before the white man and long before the wheel, when the green, dark forest was too silent to be real.
Hey, it's a great day. This is Mike Current, Energizer, and this is my lessons learned video, things that I learned while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. Look, I'm not going to go over the little things that I learned along the trail, a whole myriad of them. Like sleep with your water filter when the temperature gets down to around 32 degrees so it doesn't freeze and melt. I'm not going to cover topics like that. What I've done is I'm covering the top 5 lessons learned. These are things that impacted my thru-hike, and I think they're relevant to anyone's thru-hike. If someone's contemplating getting on the trail, I think taking serious consideration of the 5 topics that I'm going to cover to determine whether thru-hiking is really for you, and taking serious consideration of these factors in order to successfully complete the trail. Look, I'm one of those individuals that think that anyone that shows up at Campo and has got a rucksack on their back, they have a right to try. I don't care what the age is, physical capability, gender, sexual orientation, nationality. It does not matter to me. I think anybody that shows up at Campo with a ruck on their back, they have a right to try to make it to the northern terminus. But the reality is only 20% of those that start off at Campo actually make it to Manning Park. That's the reality. So what I tried to cover in these lessons learned are factors that should be considered in order to increase the odds, if you will. And to be honest, 4 out of the 5 things that I'm going to cover, I knew before I got on trail. The problem is I did not fully appreciate them to realize how significant they would be as I was walking. And I think other people, because of the low success rate, are probably in the same boat. And that's why I picked these 5 topics. So, lesson learned number 1. Thru-hiking is hard. Now, you're probably going, well, gee, Mike, that's a blinding flash of the obvious. But in reality is, I did not fully appreciate that simple fact. I've done some pretty hard things in my life, being 30 years in the military. And so when I looked at thru-hiking the PCT, I was going, well, how hard can it be? Walk in the woods 4 or 5 months out of the year? I mean, it can't be that tough. I did not fully appreciate how tough a thru-hike really would be. And I came to realize that while I was on trail. And it kind of breaks down into 3 parts. First, the trail itself and the factors that you run into while you're on trail. They're not easy. The mental strain that a thru-hiker goes through daily and over the course of the thru-hike is not something to just blow off. And the physical demands, both daily and over time, are pretty incredible. And so I'm going to be looking at the hike in this lessons learned in those 3 factors. So first off, the trail isn't easy. I did a lot of training before I got on trail, and I went on trails, I went on dirt roads, I went on roads. I did a lot of hiking. I covered probably about 1,500 miles in the 8 months up getting ready for the PCT. I probably logged 1,800 miles of practice hiking to get ready for it. So I was very, I thought I was pretty ready for this thing. But I did not hike most of the time on a trail that was tough as the Pacific Crest Trail. It's not easy a great deal of the time. There's loose rocks, there's slate, there's embedded rocks. You're jumping back and forth and that sort of thing. It's narrow in a number of spots. And the elevation at times can add up a little bit. So I did not factor in, and I didn't do training as much on hikes or trails that were likened to what I would experience on the PCT, and so I found that pretty difficult. Sleeping outside every day, particularly, I'm getting a little older and the body doesn't recover as well as it used to. That got a little hard. I mean, it's enjoyable to be under the stars and all that kind of stuff. I'm not dismissing that. But it gets a little hard on the old bones. The food is okay. Trail food gets you through and it's going to provide the right nutrition. But sometimes it's just, putting calories in the body. That's it. There's nothing real pleasant, greatly pleasant about that. And that continues for days and days and days. So, and the weather, the coldness, that you're going to deal with, the heat, the bugs, all those things kind of add up to where the trail isn't a picturesque idea that you might think, watching a 10 to 15 minute spot on a vlog or a video. It's just not that. And then there are the mental demands. Things are repetitive. It's kind of, you watch the movie Groundhog Day. It's kind of like that. Every single day you're kind of doing the same thing. You got to get up, you got to do the miles. And it becomes a repetitive routine. And there's some comfort in that. I will not deny that. But there's also this kind of dragging, hey, I wish I could be doing something else, particularly when you start to get into Northern California and you're going further than that. A lot of times on the trail, you might be alone. And so you're dealing with all of those factors and you don't have a support group. You don't have your family around you. There are daily issues, daily challenges that come up every day. And usually they're pretty minor, but they do add a level of stress. And that doesn't go away. Every day there's something that comes up that causes some stress, and you've got to deal with it, you've got to overcome it, and that just gets tiring sometimes. And it's long. This is, it's not something, hey, I'm going to go out and do for a couple weeks and then I'm done and I can go home and rest and kind of chill the brain, watch a little TV. It just continues day after day after day for months on end. And mentally, that can start to add up. I never contemplated quitting while on the trail. I mean, that word's just not in my vocabulary. That's just the way I'm built. I never thought about, myself quitting. But I can tell you that over time, I gained an appreciation for why people do quit on the trail. I mean, you're walking it. The first 150 miles of the trail kind of sucks as far as the quality of the trail itself. And if that's somebody's first experience of being on a trail, I can see somebody saying, hey, look, if the next 2,400 miles are going to be like this, I'm done. So I can see why people quit, very early on in their hikes. I can see why people quit in the Sierras. I mean, it is physically challenging, and that can take its toll. And I saw why people would quit around the halfway mark. That seems to be the next place people quit. You get to the halfway mark and it's like, hey, I'm halfway done. This is great. But it's also the realization that you've got half of the trail left. And that's a very long way. And some people get to the halfway mark, and I've had friends that did this. They got to the halfway mark and they said, this is enough. I'm done. I'm finished. And so while I never thought about quitting, I did gain an appreciation for why people do quit, because it is hard. Now, I think I set myself up in certain respects for success, both mentally and physically, before I got on trail. And I'll kind of go through that right now. So first off, first thing I did getting ready mentally for the PCT is I thought of the one thing why I was hiking the trail. If you read books on hiking, through hiking, like Zach Badger Davis's book, the owner of the online magazine, if you read his book, it talks about creating lists of why you're doing a through hike. I'll be honest with you, I don't believe in lists. I think there can be only one mission statement, one objective, one thing on the list, and that has to be ingrained in the head. If you've got to write it down, then it's not part of you as much as it should be, and it needs to be inextricably tied to hiking the trail. It has to be tied to you getting up every single day and putting miles on trail. Because if it's not, in my opinion, when a person is cold and tired or hot, body's aching, covered in bug bites, they're going to break out that list, and they're going to realize all too easy that they can complete those things on the list without actually walking the trail. And they're going to rationalize themselves right off the trail. If you don't believe this, just watch the videos or listen to the stories of trail correspondents that don't make it to the end, and listen to their last input. Typically it's a rationalization for, hey, I really don't need to be here because the things I want to do don't require me to walk the trail. So first thing I did is I figured out what was driving me to hike the PCT. I'm not going to share that. Apologize. I'm not going to share that. That's very personal to me. And it was inextricably tied to walking every single day. In order to accomplish that one thing, I had to walk the trail. And so to me, that was one of the things I did to set myself up for success. Another thing I did is I bought a Pacific Crest Trail patch. Now, to understand why I bought this, I have to tell you a little story. When I was a young second lieutenant, I attended the U.S. Army Ranger School, arguably the hardest school the Army does offer. And before I went, I got myself a Ranger tab, black and gold, half moon shape, the official Ranger tab, and I carried it with me all through Ranger School. If you're military, you understand that if you're not a Ranger and you have anything that says Ranger on it, that's hugely taboo. I mean, you don't have a bumper sticker, you don't have a t-shirt, you don't have it on your shorts, and you certainly don't have the official patch that gets sewn onto a uniform. That is huge taboo. But I had one, and I kept it hidden. All through Ranger School, I kept it hidden because I knew if the Ranger instructors ever found it, there would be hell to pay. And then late at night, while I was going through Ranger School, when nobody was watching, I would break that thing out and I would stare at it. And that would help me focus in on why I was at Ranger School. What was that one thing driving me to be in Ranger School? And it would help focus me on that one thing. And for those evenings that I couldn't break it out because people were around, I would just hold it in my hand and I would feel the letters between my fingers. And I would focus in on that one thing. And I was successful. I graduated Ranger School. So for the PCT, if you noticed, I didn't have a t-shirt that said Pacific Crest Trail. I did not have a hat or a patch or anything that had, the Pacific Crest Trail patch on it. Because in my mind, similar to the Ranger tab, I had not earned the right to wear it. But I did buy a patch, and I kept it hidden in my backpack. And late at night, when I'm in my tent, on occasion, I did break it out. And I would, if you look, this one's kind of dirty. I would stare at it and hold it. And it would help focus me on why I was on the trail. What was that one thing driving me to the northern terminus? Another thing I did to help in my mental preparation is I listened to Heather Anish Anderson's book, Thirst, 2,600 Miles to Home. If you know, Heather Anderson holds the fastest known time for completing the Pacific Crest Trail, through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. She did it in 60 days, 17 hours. That is a Herculean accomplishment. I mean, her physical, what she was able to accomplish physically just can't be overstated. It's just a phenomenal accomplishment. But in her book, Thirst, she is very open, very transparent about her mental challenges and what she went through to, accomplish what she did. And I think what she describes in her book is relevant to any potential thru-hiker. No matter what your physical capability is, you're going to be dealing with the mental game. And she's really open on how she dealt with hers. And I liked it. In fact, I liked it so much, I listened to her book 6 times before getting on trail. I was on a lot of training hikes. It only runs about 6 hours long if you buy the audio version. And so I listened to it over and over and over again. I wanted her mental game just ingrained in my head. And I could call upon it when I was on the trail. And truth be told, I would talk to Heather Anderson on the trail to myself based on what I learned about her in her book, and that helped me with my mental game, and it helped me get through the daily challenges. One of the other things I did on trail, and I've done this throughout my life, is I just found humor in arduous situations. I think you saw this a couple times on the videos when I was cold and wet and tired and it was cold wind and all that. I just started laughing. I mean, I find humor in the situation. Bob Bitchin once said or has said that the difference between an ordeal and adventure is attitude. And I thoroughly agree with that. How you approach something is going to reflect mentally. And so whenever I came to an arduous situation, I would just try to find the humor in it and keep a positive mental attitude. The last thing I did mentally to keep myself focused during my thru hike is that I never tried to swallow the watermelon. And what do I mean by that? If you read Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, it's his tale of walking the Appalachian Trail. If you read the book, I mean, not watched the movie, but if you read the book, spoiler alert, that Bill Bryson only made it about 300 miles on the Appalachian Trail before he quit. He was at a youth hostel waiting for the poor weather to subside. He went into a general store. On one of the walls of the general store was a framed map of the Appalachian Trail, and of course it had a little arrow that said, "You are here." And Bill Bryson looked at the map. He looked at the 300 miles that he had covered. He looked at how much more he still had to cover. He thought about all the tough situations that he went through just in those little 300 miles. And then he mentally started to compound those, looking at the rest of the trail. And he tried to swallow all of that. He tried to take all of that mental hardness, that physical hardness. He tried to bring that in and swallow that in, swallow a watermelon, if you will, in that one moment. And, that was it. He quit right then. And so that's what, whenever I've been faced with an arduous situation, I try not to swallow the watermelon. I just take on what's going on for that moment in time. When I was going through Ranger School, going back to the earlier story, it wasn't until 3 days before graduation that I actually thought about the idea that, hey, I was going to graduate. Most times I just thought about getting through the day or getting through sometimes just getting through the hour. But that's where I stayed focused. If you've watched my videos, you know that I did a lot of prep before I got on trail. I did a lot of reading, research, all that kind of stuff before I got on trail. But once I was on trail, I really did not think very much beyond the day that I was hiking. What did I need to do that day? Where was the water points? Where did I think I might camp that night? That was it. I didn't think about the next day or the next day or the next day. And the most I would think out at any given time was my next resupply point. Where was I going to get food for my next point? And fortunately, my wife was doing my resupply boxes, and so she could think that long term for me. But I never really thought much beyond my box. The first time I thought that I might actually complete my thru hike, the first time that thought actually came into my head, I was sitting in Stehekin, 90 miles from the border. And the only reason it popped into my head at that point is because I had to think about how much food I needed to get to the northern terminus and then walk 30 miles back to Hart's Pass where I could get a ride. So I had to factor in all that. But that was the first time in my entire thru hike, 4 months of being on the trail, a little under 4 months being on the trail, that I thought about, hey, this, where's the northern terminus? I might actually hit it. I stay focusing on just completing the day, just completing the next resupply point. I never tried to swallow the watermelon. So those are the things that I did in order to prepare myself mentally and keep myself mentally focused while on the trail. And it was still tough. Even with all that mental preparation, that mental practice throughout my hike, it was still tough just getting through and saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to be able to do this. As far as physical preparation, if you watch the first couple videos that I put out, you'll know I was in good shape before I even thought about doing a thru hike, and I spent a lot of time getting ready physically for the trail. I am a firm believer that a person shouldn't count on getting in shape while they're on trail. I think that's a poor strategy, in my opinion. I think that's a poor strategy because when you're physically down, your body is not up to par. It just makes everything else harder, including making decisions. Your decision making is affected by it, and it may lead to you getting off the trail prematurely, just because you're having a harder time than you should. But I did a lot to get ready for the hike. I'm not going to belabor that point on this video. I did an article. I wrote an article for the trek, and you can Google it. If you look up Old Man of the PCT, the trek, preparing for the physical challenges of the Pacific Crest Trail, if you Google that, you can read in detail how I looked at physical preparation for getting ready for a thru hike and what I did to get ready for that. And the only thing I would say is I wrote the article before I completed my last phase. I talk about 3 phases of physical preparation in the article. There was actually a 4th phase between COVID-19 coming out and then when I actually decided to get on the trail. I had a 4th phase where I went 30 days of 25 miles plus a day hiking, training hike, to get the body just used to the daily mileage. So that would be the only thing I would add to the article. But if you read the article, you'll kind of gain an idea of what I feel about the physical preparation. But even with that, all that physical prep, I had a tough time on trail. Not so much the daily. I'll be honest with you, the daily demands weren't that big a deal until I got injured, of course. I slipped down some rocks and injured my knee, and that made it a little harder. But it was the physical demands over time, just having to do it day after day after day after day. It's a long. I was only on the trail for just under 4 months, and that was demanding. And if a person's going to be on it for 5-6 months, it's just going to be compounded even that much more to where the demands are going to be tough. Some folks say that that vloggers only show the good side of the trail, the pretty side of the trail. They don't show all this arduous stuff. I watched a lot of vloggers before I started my thru hike, and I would disagree with that point. I think vloggers are pretty honest in what they show. Now, obviously, they can't. If you're trying to cross a raging river, well, you can't show that on video because you can't hold the camera and prevent yourself from drowning at the same time. So they're not going to show things like that. But I think in all, vloggers are very honest about how tough it is to hike the trail. And if you just kept track of the number of vloggers that say, I'm hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and here's my equipment and all that kind of stuff, and they start off that way, and you keep track of those individuals, and you count up how many actually make it to the end, I think that in itself should give you an indication that the trail is pretty hard. But I think people see what they want to see when they watch videos. So I would just stress again that thru-hiking is a tough endeavor, and you really got to ask yourself, is this something you really want to do? And if this is what a person really wants to do and they want to undergo it, then prepare, get ready for it, so your trip won't end prematurely. Lesson learned number 2. Thru-hiking is all about motion. Now, I kind of understood this before I went on my thru-hike. I didn't fully appreciate it. And I don't think a lot of people do as well. But it's one of those concepts that if you really don't think about, you don't appreciate it, all too often the thru-hiker will begin to resent their thru-hike and they'll get off the trail. And I had more than one friend get off the trail for exactly that reason. They just didn't fully appreciate that a thru-hike, unlike other types of backpacking, is all about motion. Now, when we normally go on a backpacking trip, even if you're going from one point to another and you're going a couple hundred miles, usually when you do that, you kind of plan out your days. You sit there and you go, well, I'm going to hike from here and I'm going to stop at this lake because this lake is supposed to be real pretty and have nice views, and then I'm going to go over to here and this is supposed to be a nice river and I'm going to go there, and you plan those things out. But it's destination hiking. You're going from where you are to a point you have already predetermined that you are going to stop for some reason. And if you get to that point, let's say you look at the map and you go, well, it's so many miles, I think I'm going to get there around 4 o'clock. And if you get there at 2 o'clock, I mean, what's going to happen? You're going to sit there and go, yeah, I'm here at 2 o'clock. I've got 2 extra hours to swim in the lake and enjoy myself and sit out in the sun and do all those things. That is destination hiking. Nothing wrong with it. Great way to go. That's what we all do when we go into the woods. Except through hiking isn't that. Through hiking is all about motion. If you get to the lake 2 hours early and you're a through hiker, guess what? You're not stopping. You're going to continue to go because you've got more hours of daylight and you've got miles to do. So you're not going to stop at that one particular point. For a through hike, you have to hike every single day. You've got to get up in the morning. You got to put miles on the trail if you want to get to the end. And having the mental capacity and understanding that and appreciating that fact, it takes a certain amount of acceptance that you have to always stay in motion. And that doesn't mean that you won't enjoy the sights. You will. You'll go by and you'll look at the vistas and you'll look at the views and you'll stop at the lake and you'll enjoy it. But what you won't do is stop. You keep moving until it's dark because you got miles to do. You got to get to the end and your weather window is short. And that is what through hiking is about. And that's the difference between through hiking and other hiking. And just accepting that fact, you might make it to the end. If you don't, chances are you're going to begin to resent your through hike. You're going to want to stop. You're going to take too many stops. You're going to run out of time. Or you're just going to not feel that through hiking is right for you. And it may not be. If that type of hiking is something that just doesn't appeal to you, if that methodology, that mindset doesn't appeal to you, then, do something else. Take those 5 to 6 months and go hiking in the woods, but don't do a through hike because a through hike requires you to constantly be in motion. Lesson learned number 3. Through hiking is an inflexible endeavor. Now, a lot of people will say the key to successfully completing a through hike is to embrace flexibility. I disagree with that saying because I think it is only half true. A through hike, by its definition, is extremely inflexible if you think about it. For the Pacific Crest Trail, the trail itself is 2,653 miles long and about 18 inches wide. That is your path. For a through hike, you have to start at one end and you have to finish at the other end. And you have to walk one step in front of the other. It has to be a continuous footpath, which means you have to accept the challenge of whatever comes at you during the next step, whether it's convenient or not. There's no jumping around, there's no skipping around that you can do. So whatever, in that next step, if the weather's bad, the weather's bad. If the weather's good, great, the weather's good. If the trail is covered in snow at that point, well, you got to go through the snow. If it's covered in mud, you got to go through the mud. If it's foggy and you're missing the vistas, like you saw I was at a couple points up in Washington, well, it's just the nature of the hike itself. It is extremely inflexible. A through hike has a particular weather window. On the PCT, it averages 5 months from mid-April to mid-September. You have to accept that in order to complete a through hike. That means if you want to do it in 5 months, you have to walk 132 miles per week on average in order to accomplish it within that period of time. If you don't accomplish it within that period of time, you're accepting the risk of weather either at the beginning of your hike or at the end of your hike, weather really having an impact on your hike and perhaps causing you to get off trail and ending your through hike. So you got to get up, like, lesson learned number 2, it's all about motion. You've got to walk 132 miles per week in order to make it on time. That is extremely inflexible. So for me, it isn't embracing flexibility. To me, a thru hiker has to embrace the inflexibility of the trail. And then they have to overcome, adapt, and modify every single day what they are doing in order to meet the challenges that they will face every day, because something's going to come up, in order to accommodate the inflexible nature of the trail. Lesson learned number 4, weight matters. Now, I'll be honest with you, I thought I had this one nailed. I really did. I thought I studied and I fully understood this concept before I got on trail, and the reality is I failed massively. Before I got on trail, the equipment I bought, it was all lightweight equipment. I thought a great deal about my base weight, and even with vlogging, where I was carrying about 1.5 pounds of extra gear so I could vlog, I kept my base weight down for most times, not in the Sierra because of the extra gear in the Sierra, but most times my base weight in my rucksack was at 15 pounds or under. So I thought I did a good job. As far as that's concerned. And then just on my body alone, I typically run between 145 to 150 pounds with a BMI of between around 23, body mass index of around 23. And then when I got on trail, I dropped weight. I dropped weight before I got on trail because I didn't want to start off in campo with extra poundage on the body. The knees don't care where the weight's coming from, whether it's in the, it's around the waist or it's in the backpack. Weight is weight. And so I dropped weight before I got on trail. So I was just under 140 pounds when I was at campo. As you know, I got down to about 130 pounds in northern by Kennedy Meadows North, and that was a mistake. I lost way too much weight, and I had to gain it back. And by the time I finished my hike, I was back up to about 140 pounds when I completed the hike. But I dropped weight so my knees wouldn't have to carry that extra weight. So not only in my base weight, but on my body itself, I tried to reduce the weight as much as I could. So I thought, boy, I did a great job. And then I totally failed to appreciate how much food weighs. Didn't think of it at all. And as you know, if you watch the other videos, particularly if you watch the last video when I talked about my resupply strategy, I went from 30 resupply points to 16 on the trail. And I just dumbly thought, well, I'll just put more food in the rucksack. That's all I'll do. I'll just add up, and in the desert I did a 210 mile carry and a 260 mile carry, and in the Sierra I did a 170 mile carry and a 200 mile carry. I figured, well, food's food. You're going to eat it. It's going to go away. No big deal. No, food is heavy. And so the first thing I failed to do when I looked at my food is I really didn't think about weight versus calories. Thought about it a little bit, but not as much as I should have, given how much food I was carrying between resupply points. And that caused a lot of issues for me. How many calories do you get for that ounce of food? And that sounds kind of anal, but you really need to think about that, especially if you're going to go from a long resupply point. I just didn't factor in that. And I didn't factor in how much weight all the food would weigh, and then how much that would affect my daily mileage. I figured, well, if I'm going from a 35-pound rucksack to a 45-pound rucksack, I'm probably going to go a little slower every day, but that's okay. I mean, I'm not going to have to walk into that town and then walk out of the town, and that's going to take a whole day. And so, although I'm going slower every day, I'm not having to take that time to go into the town, and so it's going to balance itself out, and it's actually better for me to just carry the extra weight in the rucksack. And it turned out that was not the case at all. There is a point of diminishing returns on how much your ruck weighs. Because it's just not a simple matter of just walking on a trail. When you put a heavy rucksack on, you walk down the road, you go, okay, this is how fast I walk. The trail's not like that. You're going to have to walk down a trail where you're constantly having to balance yourself. You're skipping from one rock to another, and you're jumping over things, and you're having to be nimble on your feet. So going from a 35-pound ruck to a 45-pound ruck is huge, and it had a serious detriment. At a certain point, I reached it where my mileage just dropped completely down, and I could not do the mileage I thought I could do with the heavy rucksack. And it would have been better for me had I just, packed a lighter ruck and took more resupply stops. I actually would have been more efficient in my hike if I would have done that. And that's something for you to think about as well when you're going through that. One, think about the food that you're going to, besides lowering your base weight, and if you got some extra poundage on the body, it doesn't hurt to lose those before you get on trail, because again, it's all weight on the knees. But also think about your food. What food are you carrying? And you'll pick up that energy bar and go, this really doesn't weigh that much. Well, put 20 of them together and it starts to add up. So think about what calories am I getting for that ounces? And this is the right kind of calories I'm going to get. And then think about, well, in total, how much weight is this? And when does it hit that point where, no, I shouldn't go over this. It's better for me to go into town, get another resupply, come back out on trail, and start again with a light ruck. You'll have to do that. Weight does matter. My last lesson learned, lesson number 5, is people are kind on trail. I'll be honest with you, this was a total surprise to me, and I'll explain why. Look, I've spent almost my entire life in the military community bubble, both as a young dependent. My dad was in the military, so I was always on military bases. And then, through most of my adult life, I was in the military, so I was always surrounded by all my friends and colleagues were in the military. I lived on military bases. I was surrounded by military people. So that's what I was used to. And it is a subculture in America. It really is. And so when I retired now 4 years ago, and stepped out into the civilian world, in certain respects, it was like stepping into a foreign country for me. And I'm still getting used to that. I'm still getting used to being, now a civilian and living around civilians. And I really didn't know how civilians respond to one another. It's just pure ignorance. I just didn't know. So one of the things that when I was getting ready for my thru hike, it was like, well, I want to depend on the least amount of people that I can. My wife is doing my resupply boxes. My sister helped out a great deal in sending me messages about weather and that sort of thing, and all that really helped. But as far as outside people, I wanted to minimize that. And you'll know that when if you read or watched my videos before, I had certain rules, and it was all to reduce the amount of people that I had to depend on. And when COVID-19 happened, of course, that doubly affected or, impacted my resolve to not depend on anybody. I would not accept hikes, or hitchhiking. I wouldn't accept rides, that sort of thing. That's what it all was. And to my incredible surprise, the people I met on trail were just absolutely amazing. The people I hiked with, whether they were fast or slow, whether they were young or old, the other thru hikers I ran into, just incredible people, and so caring and willing to give of themselves. I mean, they're having a difficult time themselves, but they're willing to, hey, do you need something? Do you need help? And willing to share their experiences and be open. And as you know, I'm an extreme introvert. I don't open up very well at all to many people. But here are these people around me, and they're just being so incredibly kind and amazing. And it was humbling. I got to admit, it's just extremely humbling experience. And then, as you know, I was avoiding going into towns. I did most of my resupply, never going into a town. And that was a mistake, because the few times I did go into town, the business owners that I would talk to, they were just such nice people, and they were so welcoming to me as a thru hiker and my comrades through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and anybody. I mean, through hiking. Let's be honest. You go into any of these PCT towns, the number of thru hikers, that's a tiny fraction to the number of other type tourists that visit those towns. I mean, it's tiny. But these people were so kind, and I saw on other social media forums, people would comment and say, "Oh, well, they're just doing that because they're desperate for money and you're giving them money." No. Time after time after time, people that own these businesses would do something that had nothing to do with financial gain for them. They would just do it out of the kindness of their heart. And I relayed some of those stories on my videos a couple times, but it would happen over and over again, where these people would give of themselves, and it had nothing to do with finances, it had nothing to do with them gaining anything. It was just them being incredibly nice human beings. And it was the same thing for the people I met in the towns. Just, we talk about the kindness of small town America. It's alive and well. The people were just absolutely wonderful. I hitchhiked 3 times while on the Pacific Crest Trail. I'd never hitchhiked before in my life, never done it. And if you've watched the videos, the first time I did it, it was right out of outside, it was right at Crater Lake National Park. My knee was hurting me, and my wife, she said, get your ass down to the highway and hitchhike back to Mazama Village, and we'll be there tomorrow to give you a knee brace. So I did what I was told. But when I got out on the road, I was thinking, nobody's going to pick me up. This is a waste of time. Not 20 cars went by. Not 20 cars went by, and a person stopped and says, "Hey, you need a ride? Where do you want to go?" And that interaction I had with that person for those 30 minutes, it was an incredible experience to get to know them, and they got to know me. And they were giving them themselves. The other 2 times I hitchhiked was off of Stevens Pass, to get into Skycomish, to go from Stevens Pass down to Skycomish, the town, and then back. And when I was in the town, if you know Skycomish, you have to go across a little bridge, and then you go past a pizza joint, and then you're out on the highway, and that's where you hitchhike up to Stevens Pass. Well, I was passing the pizza joint and walking to the highway, So going through the pizza joint, their parking lot, I hadn't even gotten to the highway, and somebody had come out of the store, looked at me and says, "Hey, are you going? Do you need a ride to Stevens Pass?" And I turned around and I said yes. And he says, "Well, hold on, I'm waiting for my food, and as soon as I get it, I'll give you a ride. I'm going that way." So I hadn't even gotten to the road. I had not even gotten to the road, put out my thumb, and somebody had already offered me a ride to take them up, to take me up to Stevens Pass. The absolute kindness of people just astounded me while I was on trail. And if I were to do it over again, I would not have been so adamant about being independent, because those few times I was able to interact with the townspeople and the business people, and my fellow thru-hikers, those were incredible moments that I got to meet other people, and that was good. With that said, I do not believe in a larger thru-hiking community, a community, a thru-hiking diaspora, if you will. I have belonged to a number of organizations, both formal and informal, during my life. Most of them military related, some of them to do with sailing or boating or motorcycling. But I'm new to the whole backpacking, thru-hiking scene, and so over the past year I've kind of analyzed this greater thru-hiking community, and I'll be honest with you, I've never belonged to or witnessed an organization like this greater thru-hiking community that is so intent on kicking its own self in the balls. The amount of self-flagellation and negativity is just incredible. And so if you're intending to do a thru-hike, I would say, trust in your trail family. Trust in the people that are actually hiking the trail with you. That year, your year group, trust in them. Trust in the business owners that you will come in contact in these small PC towns. Trust in the townsfolk that you will meet, because they're going to be wonderful. Ignore this greater thru-hiking community, and particularly when you see it on social media forums. That's the only place that you will find negativity. Ignore that. And if you do that, you are going to find that people are incredibly kind, and you are going to have an extremely positive experience while on trail. So those were the top 5 lessons learned while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. In each of those, embedded in each of those, I answered a number of questions that I was asked while on the PCT, and during my videos in the comment sections. I answered a number of questions. But there are 4 other areas that I would like to delve into briefly in order to round out answering your questions. First off, why Old Man in the PCT? Why did I pick that title? I actually addressed that in my very first video, but it seems I keep being asked about it because one of the number 1 comments is, "Hey Mike, you're not old." Depending on the context and who I'm around, I'm 57 years old. I'm not that old, depending on your context. As a thru-hiker, if you look at the age demographics for thru-hikers on the PCT, I fall in the old man category. It's just a reality of it. When I created the title Old Man and the PCT based on the Ernest Hemingway's book Old Man and the Sea, I was attempting to create an incongruency. And I took a risk because I did not know how my thru hike was going to turn out. But I was attempting to create an incongruency. I wanted to say one thing, old man, and I wanted to demonstrate something else. And I completed my thru hike in 116 days and 5 hours, and that's pretty good no matter what your age is. And so to me, that was the incongruency. And I didn't do it for me. I didn't not do that for me, some ego trip or something like that. I did it for the rest of us, older thru hikers, because I think there are a lot of older thru hikers every year on the trail, and they're just crushing it. And they should get that credit. And so that's why Old Man and the PCT. The second topic I'll cover is I've been asked on a number of occasions, hey Mike, is there another thru hike in the works? You know, is this the start of a Triple Crown? No, it's not. Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail has been on my bucket list since, I was in college. It's the hike I have always wanted to do. And I've finally been afforded an opportunity to do it. And I'm glad I did. I had a wonderful time. I've never had a desire to hike the Continental Divide Trail. I have read books on the Appalachian Trail. Hoping to generate a desire to hike it without success. Just never, never had the desire to hike the AT. The PCT has always been my love. It's the one I wanted to do, and it's the one I did. As far as other hikes, I'd like to hike Machu Picchu. I mean, who wouldn't, right? I'd like to do that. I'd like to hike Hadrian's Wall. I rode alongside Hadrian's Wall years ago on a motorcycle when I was living in England. But I'd like to walk it. Coast to coast. The Camino del Santiago. I'd like to do that. My wife blew out her knee years ago, so she really can't hike that many miles a day. But the Camino, you hike 10 miles a day, you sleep in a bed every night, you get fed breakfast and dinner, you drink wine for lunch. To me, it doesn't even count as a thru hike, but it'd be a lot of fun to do over a summer. Just have a great time having that experience, having that adventure. So I would like to do that. My next physical challenge, if we're going to define physical challenges, that I would like to do is run the Boston Marathon. If you've been watching these videos, you know that I've run marathons, in my past, but I've never run Boston. And if you're a marathoner, you know that Boston is the ultimate testament to being a marathon runner. And it has been on my bucket list since I was 14, and I read my first book on the history of the race. And so, I'd like to get my legs back into racing shape instead of hiking shape. I'd like to get them back into racing shape. I don't think it'll happen in 2021 because I think COVID-19 will still affect the race. But maybe 2022. I'd just like to be part of the crowd and run that race. So that's the next physical challenge that I'm going to be gearing up for. As far as traveling adventures, I mentioned it on the last video. My wife and I, we own a 42-foot cruising blue water sailboat. Great beautiful boat. And we own a 32-foot Class A motorhome. So I'm retired. It'd be nice to get on, one of those modes of transportation and just kind of enjoy ourselves. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing in on, hopefully in the next few years. So the third topic I'll cover is through hiking next year. This is for the individuals out there that are watching this video that are contemplating doing a through hike next year, particularly of the Pacific Crest Trail. My advice to you is go for it. Just go for it. Do it. I mean, let's look at it. COVID-19 is still going to be with us next year. It's not going away. Even if they came out with a vaccine by the end of this year, that vaccine is not going to be readily available to where enough individuals across the United States where we're going to be able to go back to some kind of normal life. That's I'm just being realistic. That's not going to happen and probably until the end of 2021. Again, I'm being realistic about it. My son and I own a business, and chances are, we're looking at it that we will not even be able to open that business next summer. Summer's the height of our business season, and we're probably going to have to write off, as we did this summer, we're going to have to write off next summer as well. It's just not going to happen. It's just the way it is. But I would still recommend that you go on a through hike. I don't think the Pacific Crest Trail Association will be issuing through hike permits in 2021. I don't think that's going to happen. They've already delayed issuing the first round of permits that normally takes place in October. And I don't think, if you go down their line of reasoning of why, they wanted people off the trail, I don't agree with that line of reasoning, but if you follow that line of reasoning, it's a morality-based argument. It's not an information-based argument. It's not a legal-based argument. It's a morality-based argument. And if you follow that line of reasoning, that's still going to be valid in 2021. So I don't see them changing their position. If you have a morality-based argument, you just can't back away from it. It's not like an information-based argument or a legal-based argument where your position can change based on new information. Morality-based argument doesn't work that way. So come 2021, I don't think they'll be issuing permits. I think that announcement's going to come in January, early January. I think they will couch their public announcement as that decision being a joint, Pacific Crest Trail Association, U.S. Forestry Service decision. But no, this will be totally on the Pacific Crest Trail Association's own volition to make this decision. The U.S. Forestry Service is a government entity. They are under government oversight, and having spent almost my entire adult life in service to the government, I know that a government entity would not make a decision based on a morality-based argument. That's the quickest way of losing your job if you're a leader in a government organization, because there would be an investigation, Inspector General would come out, and that guy would be packing his bags within weeks. So I don't see that happening. The U.S. Forestry Service, just as they did this past year, is going to keep the trail open, and they would honor long-distance permits just as they did this year. Please remember that the Pacific Crest Trail Association doesn't have any inherent authority over the Pacific Crest Trail. They don't. They have delegated authority. The inherent authority lies with the U.S. Forestry Service. The U.S. Forestry Service manages the Pacific Crest Trail on behalf of the American people. It belongs to us. The stewards of that to manage it is the U.S. Forestry Service, and they delegate that authority for long-term permits or that portion, they delegate that to the Pacific Crest Trail Association. But this year, as you know, all the permits remain valid because they have the U.S. Forestry Service stamp on them. They did. My permit was valid all year. The trail was open all this year. It will be open all next year. But the U.S. Forestry Service is not staffed. They're not officed to issue long-term permits. They have given that duty and responsibility to the Pacific Crest Trail Association. They've done a wonderful job on it in the past. But this past year, this next year, I don't think they're going to be issuing permits if they maintain the same line of reasoning that they did this past year. And so doing the trail is going to be a little bit more difficult. You don't need a long-term PCTA permit to thru-hike the Pacific Crest Trail. It is more difficult to do it without that overarching permit. That is true. But it is doable. It is doable. So come January, again, this is my opinion, come January when the PCTA makes their announcement that they are not going to be issuing permits in 2021, soon after that, people will post online, hey, this is how you thru-hike the Pacific Crest Trail without that long-term permit. These are the permits you need. This is where you need them. This is how you get them. That's going to be out there. I imagine if you sign up for the Facebook page, Still Hiking Class of 2021, it'll be listed on there and you'll be able to take that advice. And again, it's a little bit more work to do, but you should go for it. You should do it. And I'm not dismissing, I'm not discounting, I'm not downsizing the seriousness of COVID-19. I'm not. It is a very serious disease. It is taking the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans. And this is a very tough time for the United States. But hopefully you take precautions when you're social distancing and you're sitting at home and you're practicing all that. You are taking precautions. So you will not contract COVID-19 and you will not spread COVID-19. Hopefully you're doing that. I mean, that's what I do. And hopefully you take those practices, if you decide to hike the PCT, hopefully you take those practices on trail. Don't be reckless. Don't do stupid things. Have your mask, do your precautions, and do that social distancing thing. But if the spread of COVID-19, and if that really is the thing where you're trying to limit, then I can tell you unequivocally that your interactions with people will be a fraction, far less, just a fraction of what they are if you're just sitting at home and practicing good social distancing skills. I did both. I sat at home, I did the whole social distancing thing, and I wear the mask and not go out unless you need to and all that kind of stuff. I did that before I went on trail. And then I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail for 4 months, and now I'm sitting back at the house and I'm doing that social distancing thing, and I'm wearing my mask and I'm trying to limit my exposure and all that kind of stuff. And I can tell you unequivocally that my interactions with strangers and my chances of contracting COVID-19 are far greater sitting at home than they were on the trail. I just didn't run into people, and spent a majority of my time alone hiking the trail. And when I ran into other hikers, you're in wide open spaces. You don't have to be within 6 feet of each other. Even people I hiked with for days, we would stay 6 feet apart. Not because, oh God, COVID-19. It's just natural that you do that. And then, of course, when I would go into town, I would take all the same precautions if I was going into a grocery store that I take here. I would do that on trail, or if I needed to go to a restaurant to buy something, or I needed to go to the post office. I would take the same precautions I take here. But the reality is I did it all, I had to go and visit places like that far less when I was on the trail than I do just doing my normal business actions sitting at home. So if that's the intent, go out on the trail, you'll reduce your chances of actually getting and spreading COVID-19. But I do recommend go out, enjoy yourself, have a good time. The trail will be open. Now there might be some parts not open due to the recent fires in California and in Oregon and a little bit in Washington. But the trail's going to be open. The small towns along the Pacific Crest Trail are going to be open. And like they were this year, they're going to be welcoming tourists. When thru-hikers take up a tiny fraction of that. And you can go in and be part of that, that population. But it's going to be open, and it's going to be an enjoyable experience. And you will have a positive time while you're out on the trail. Again, take precautions, but you will have a wonderful, wonderful time. So the fourth point and last point on this video is this the last video from Old Man in PCT? Yeah, this is it. I made the videos for fun and for family, and by extension, all of you got to come along and enjoy the ride. I hope you enjoyed them. If you didn't, there was no cost to it, and you can turn them off. But I hope you enjoyed the information that I did put out. I had fun making the videos. But yeah, this is the last one. With that, if at some point in the next few years you're looking at YouTube and you happen to see some videos about an older couple cruising around in the Caribbean on their sailboat named Wandering Currents, well, you might want to click on that maybe, and you might recognize that old man and the beautiful lady that's with him. But that would be probably the next time I ever put out a video. Again, hope you enjoyed the ride. But until the next time, have a great day.
There was